Thugs killed a blind girl's dog, but they had no idea her father was a Navy SEAL ready to make them regret it. 10-year-old Jada Brooks woke up to the gentle nudge of her golden retriever, Sunny. Despite being blind since birth, Jada's world was full of sound, smell, and touch, mostly thanks to Sunny. Her small apartment in Atlanta was quiet, almost peaceful. But that morning, distant barking didn't sound like joy. It was fear. Jada's father, Marcus Brooks, a retired Navy SEAL, was away on a training trip. Little did she know, the day would test everything he had taught her about resilience. As Jada reached the living room, she felt the carpet wet beneath her hands. Sunny's whimpering stopped abruptly. Then came silence. A gang of local thugs had broken in, thinking the apartment was empty. They wanted money, street-level intimidation, and thought they could scare a little blind girl. They never expected Sunny to fight back. Nor did they expect Jada's scream to carry authority. But it was too late. Sunny lay motionless. Jada sank to the floor, shaking, hands gripping Sunny's fur. Her tears fell freely, the apartment echoing with grief. Why now?" she whispered. Her blindness made her feel helpless, but her love for Sunny had always made her feel brave. She dialed her father with trembling fingers. Marcus answered immediately, his voice calm but sharp. "Jada, breathe. Tell me exactly what happened." The sun had barely dipped below the horizon when Marcus Brooks's black SUV rolled to a stop outside the apartment complex. The city was quiet, almost unnaturally so, as if holding its breath in anticipation of what was about to unfold. He didn't rush. He never rushed. Every movement was deliberate, precise, honed from years of Navy SEAL training that had taken him to the most dangerous corners of the world and back. Stealth, combat, tactical strategy, these were not just skills to him, they were extensions of who he was. Marcus stepped out of the vehicle, his boots hitting the pavement with a muted authority. The faint hum of the city seemed to recede in his presence, replaced by a focused silence. He scanned the surroundings in a practiced sweep, the streetlights casting long, jagged shadows, the flickering neon signs in the distance, a stray cat slinking along the alley. Every detail mattered. Danger could be anywhere, but tonight, his only target was clear. He had known the call would come sooner or later, that someone somewhere would think they could touch Jada. They were wrong. Inside the apartment, the air was thick with fear and uncertainty. Jada sat curled on the couch, her knees pulled to her chest, hands trembling. Her wide eyes darted to the door as Marcus entered. For a moment, she froze, caught between relief and lingering terror. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and fear. Marcus knelt beside her with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the deadly precision that defined his life. He did not need to speak loudly to command attention. His presence alone demanded it. "Jada," he said softly, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel, "I need every detail. Start from the beginning." Jada hesitated, biting her lip. The memory of the attack still burned in her mind, faces twisted with malice, hands gripping her roughly, the sudden paralyzing fear that had rooted her to the spot. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. They came for me after school," she whispered. "3 of them, masked, they grabbed me. I tried to run," her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. Marcus's eyes narrowed, but he did not show anger yet. Anger was a tool, not a reaction. He let her recount every moment, the alley, the struggle, the way they laughed when they thought they had her. Every pause, every hesitation, every whispered word of fear was recorded in his mind. This was more than intel. It was a map of the enemy's movements, weaknesses, and arrogance. "You're safe now," he murmured, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. His touch was firm but reassuring. "No one is getting near you while I'm around, I promise." Her small hands, still trembling, clutched his shirt. "Dad, why didn't you come sooner?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and longing. Marcus's jaw tightened. The world he had walked in, the missions, the deployments, the battles, had kept him away, yes, but nothing could justify the terror she had faced. "I'm here now," he said simply, almost to himself, "and I won't leave until they pay for what they did." He rose slowly, his movements fluid, almost cat-like. Marcus began to survey the apartment with the meticulous eye of a man who had trained for every scenario imaginable. Windows were checked, doors inspected, corners scanned. No detail escaped him. Even in a city full of chaos, he could sense anomalies: the slight scrape on the floor near the front door, the faint scent of gasoline from a recently used lighter. Then he paused. His mind raced, reconstructing the attack. The way they had moved, the precision of their ambush, the masks they wore. It wasn't random. It was professional. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone who knew exactly who Jada was. Marcus clenched his fists, his calm demeanor hiding a storm that threatened to break. He had spent years dismantling networks, eliminating threats before they could harm the innocent. And now, those skills would serve a more personal purpose. He would find them, and when he did, justice would not merely be served, it would be absolute. "Jada," he said, kneeling again, meeting her gaze. "I need you to remember everything. Every detail matters. Even the smallest thing, a sound, a smell, a word they said. It could be the key." She nodded, swallowing hard, forcing herself to recall the fragmented memory. Marcus listened intently, nodding occasionally, his mind assembling a tactical plan in real time. Every detail she offered fed into the framework of a meticulous operation he was already visualizing. Hours passed. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious to the storm that had quietly entered the apartment. Marcus didn't move from his vigil. Every so often, he'd glance at Jada, ensuring she felt protected. When she finally fell asleep, exhausted from recounting the events, he remained awake, staring at the ceiling. His mind ran through scenarios, escape routes, potential allies, likely suspects. Nothing was left to chance. By the time dawn broke, Marcus had a plan forming in his mind, sharp and unyielding as the steel he carried. He would strike, but he would not be reckless. The people who dared threaten his family would learn quickly that some storms cannot be weathered, they must be survived. And those who underestimated him would discover that the man who had trained to face death in every corner of the world now had a singular mission: protecting his daughter and ensuring no one ever harmed her again. He finally allowed himself to breathe, his shoulders relaxing slightly, but only slightly. Marcus Brooks was a man of action, and action demanded preparation. The world had changed tonight, but he would change it back. For Jada, for his family, and for every innocent life that had ever been threatened by those who thought power came without consequence, Marcus Brooks was coming. And when he did, the storm would not just arrive. It would obliterate everything in its path. Justice, Marcus realized, wasn't something you waited for. It was something you executed with precision, and he was the finest executor the world had ever known. Marcus didn't rush in recklessly. That was never his way. Every operation he had ever led, whether in the deserts of far-off war zones or in the shadowed alleys of foreign cities, started with a plan more precise than a surgeon's cut. Tonight was no different. He sat at the small kitchen table, the dim lamp above casting a soft yellow glow across the scattered papers, and the laptop screen where grainy satellite images were frozen mid-zoom. Streets, rooftops, alleyways, everything within 5 blocks of the thugs' known territory was under his scrutiny. He studied the neighborhood like a predator examining the terrain before the hunt. The district was a tangled mix of low-income housing, abandoned warehouses, and strip-mall storefronts that never closed, perfect for criminals who thought darkness and chaos could shield them. They thought wrong. Marcus traced the main route in and out of their hideout with his finger. 3 streets connected to the building, but only one offered a clean escape. One had a collapsed section of pavement, another was monitored by a faulty city camera that flickered unpredictably, and the third, the one closest to an open lot, was wide, clear, and perfect for a quick getaway. Good. Predictable. He zoomed in on the security feed of the corner liquor store. 2 cameras, one pointed across the street toward the building where the gang usually gathered, and another angled toward the alley that wrapped around the back. He rewound the footage from the past few days, watching the flow of foot traffic, noting the times when their lookout stepped outside to smoke, the moment the side door opened for food deliveries, the brief period around midnight when the gang members argued loudly enough that the entire street could hear. Patterns. Always patterns. Even criminals had routines, and routines could be exploited. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he clicked through the frames. He spotted a blind spot, a narrow strip between the liquor store's dumpster and the back wall of the gang's building. No cameras, no visibility from the street. Only someone who had spent years studying tactical environments would notice that thin sliver of shadow. "That's my entrance," he murmured to himself. He marked it mentally, already crafting the operation step by step. No guns, he didn't need them. No explosives, not his style tonight. This wasn't war, this was justice, the personal kind, delivered with precision and zero collateral damage. By nightfall, Marcus had the entire neighborhood mapped out in his mind like a living blueprint. Every alleyway, every dark corner, every potential threat was accounted for. He didn't need reinforcements, he never had. His body was a weapon honed for moments exactly like this. But even in his focus, he remained aware of Jada. She sat on the couch, hugging a pillow, watching him work silently. Every now and then she opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it, overwhelmed by the weight of the night. Marcus finally stood and walked to her. The plan was ready. He didn't need more time, only the right moment. He knelt beside her, his expression calm but filled with a fire she had seen only a few times in her life. "Sonny may be gone," he whispered, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, "but you'll see bravery runs in our family." Jada's eyes shimmered, not entirely with fear now but with a fragile thread of hope. Marcus continued softly, "What happened tonight will never happen again. I promise you that." She nodded slowly, gripping his hand. "Dad, what are you going to do?" Marcus didn't answer directly. Instead, he gave her a look she knew well, the kind that meant he had a mission and nothing in the world could stop him. His silence was enough. He stood, pulling his jacket from the chair, checking the inside pocket where a simple tactical tool rested. Lightweight, quiet, efficient. It wasn't a weapon meant to kill, only to disable. Tonight he wasn't a soldier. He was a father, and fathers fought differently. As he approached the door, he paused and glanced back. Jada watched him with wide, worried eyes. Marcus offered her a reassuring nod, the kind that steadied her breathing and made her believe in something unbreakable. Then he stepped outside. The night air was cool, the city murmuring softly with distant traffic. Marcus inhaled deeply, the familiar rush of preparation flowing through his veins. The mission wasn't revenge, it was protection, justice, and a message to anyone who thought vulnerability made his family easy targets. The criminals had no idea what was coming. They saw the world as prey and predators, but Marcus Brooks was something different, something far more dangerous than either. He was a storm built from discipline, rage tempered by training, and an unwavering promise made to a trembling daughter whose world had been shaken. And tonight, that storm was heading directly into enemy territory, not with fury, not with chaos, but with a plan so precise that by the time the criminals understood what was happening, their entire operation would already be dismantled. One step at a time, one target at a time, no one hurt except those who deserved it. Justice delivered quietly, efficiently, and without hesitation. Marcus disappeared into the night, his mind sharp, his heart steady, his mission clear. The plan was set. The hunt had begun. Under the cover of darkness, Marcus moved like a shadow woven into the fabric of the night. The city was alive with distant noise, sirens far away, the rumble of traffic, the occasional bark of a stray dog, but around him everything felt eerily silent, as if the night itself knew not to interfere. Every step he took was calculated, every breath controlled. His heartbeat was steady, a rhythm trained through years of missions that required absolute silence and unwavering focus. He approached the first checkpoint, a chain-link fence topped with dull barbed wire. Most people would have climbed it or cut through. Marcus simply gripped the metal, shifted his weight, and slipped through a loose section he had identified hours earlier during surveillance. No sound, no disturbance. Once inside the perimeter, he crouched low, scanning the surroundings. The neighborhood was rough, cracked sidewalks, flickering streetlights, and graffiti that told stories of gang turf wars and warnings meant for outsiders. But Marcus wasn't an outsider, not tonight. He was the storm creeping into their den. With a small device from his pocket, no bigger than a lighter, he approached the gang's secondary security system, a cheap motion alarm set up near the back door. He pressed the device against the sensor for 2 seconds. The light blinked twice, then faded. Disabled. He moved on. The hideout itself was a decaying old warehouse, once used for storage, but now a makeshift fortress for men who mistook their numbers for power. Marcus had studied the building thoroughly. 2 windows boarded up, one door reinforced but improperly bolted, rooftop access through a rusting ladder. The walls inside were thin. He could hear the faint thud of bass-heavy music leaking through the cracks. Laughter, bottles clinking. They were relaxed, confident, unaware that a trained predator was closing in. Marcus positioned himself behind a row of trash bins, peeking around just enough to observe. 4 thugs outside, smoking and joking, completely oblivious. Inside, at least 6 more, based on heat signatures and movement patterns he'd monitored earlier. They thought numbers kept them safe. They had no idea that numbers meant nothing against a man who didn't fear any of them. He waited, still as stone, letting their patterns reveal themselves. One of the lookouts wandered toward the alley, stepping away from the others to answer a phone call. Marcus seized the opening. He slipped behind the man silently, tapped the back of his neck, and cut the call with a precise chokehold that rendered him unconscious in seconds. Marcus laid him against a dumpster, securing his hands gently. He wasn't here to damage anyone more than necessary. Justice wasn't brutality. It was precision. He moved to the side wall of the warehouse. There was a thin strip of shadow between the building and the liquor store next door, an invisible passage that Marcus used to approach the back door. He pressed his ear against the old wood. Voices inside, arguments, someone complaining about losing money earlier that day. Perfect. Chaos among them meant less focus. Using a small tension wrench and pick, he unlocked the back door with a quiet click. He slipped inside. The smell hit him first. Cheap alcohol, sweat, cigarette smoke, and something sharper like gasoline. The room was dimly lit with a single bulb swinging slightly from the ceiling. Trash scattered everywhere. Folding chairs arranged in a messy circle. Weapons on the table, nothing sophisticated, just bats, knives, and a few illegal pistols. Marcus moved quickly, weaving between shadows, sticking to corners, avoiding the weak spots in the floor that creaked. One thug stood by the hallway, scrolling through his phone. Marcus stepped behind him, gripped his wrist, twisted slightly, and gently lowered him to the floor. Not a sound. The operation continued room by room. Marcus moved with a fluid grace that came from decades of training, each motion purposeful, each takedown controlled. Some he neutralized with pressure points, others with quick disarms followed by immobilization. Not one had time to raise an alarm. Not one knew what hit them. By the time the majority of the gang realized someone else was in the building, it was far too late. A thug burst into the hallway, eyes wide, scanning the darkness desperately. "Who's there?" he shouted. His voice trembled. Marcus stepped into the faint light, his presence alone enough to freeze the man. No mask, no weapon, just cold, unwavering resolve. "You hurt an innocent," Marcus said, his voice calm, unwavering. "You will pay the consequences." The thug swallowed, stumbling backward, but Marcus didn't chase him. He didn't need to, because at that exact moment, a hum of engines echoed from outside. Police cruisers, 4 of them, glided silently toward the hideout, lights off but ready to illuminate the entire block. Marcus had contacted them anonymously earlier, feeding them evidence, coordinates, and timestamps, enough to ensure they arrived at the perfect moment, enough to ensure the gang would be caught red-handed. Marcus stepped back into the shadows as law enforcement surrounded the building. Officers stormed in, shouting commands. The gang members panicked, scrambling, dropping weapons, yelling over each other in confusion. To them, it must have felt like the universe collapsing. To Marcus, it was justice unfolding with flawless timing. He watched from the narrow gap between the buildings as the thugs were handcuffed, lined up, and read their rights. Some protested, some cried, some were too stunned to speak. But all of them were caught, all of them were done, and not one had been harmed beyond a bruised ego. As the officers cleared the scene, Marcus slipped away into the night, unseen, unheard, and untouched. He didn't need credit. He didn't need recognition. His reward was simple, knowing Jada was safe. The mission wasn't about vengeance. It was about protection, about making sure no one ever made the mistake of thinking his daughter was alone. The city resumed its noise. The shadows swallowed Marcus once more. The operation was complete, and justice had been served with silent, perfect precision. The city had returned to its usual rhythm by the time Marcus stepped back into the quiet apartment. The distant hum of traffic and faint sirens in the night forming a soft soundtrack to the victory that had just unfolded. And yet inside, the air was thick with the lingering tension of what had transpired. Because while the streets now held the illusion of safety, the echoes of fear that had once gripped Jada still clung to her in tiny, trembling bursts. Marcus closed the door gently behind him. The click of the lock, a satisfying punctuation to the chaos he had orchestrated so flawlessly outside. And he surveyed the room briefly, ensuring nothing had been disturbed, nothing out of place. The faint scent of her perfume mixing with the antiseptic cleanliness of the apartment, as if the space itself had held its breath, while he carried out the operation that had ensured she would never be touched again. And then he spotted her. Small and fragile on the couch, hugging herself as if the act could shield her from the world, and his chest tightened not from exertion, but from the sheer weight of the fear she had endured, because every father knows the fear of losing a child is an ache unlike any other, and Marcus crossed the room in measured steps, each footfall silent yet commanding, his presence immediately calming, not through words, but through the aura of protection he radiated. A lifetime of training in stealth and combat distilled into the simple act of being there for her, and when Jada looked up, her wide eyes glistening with tears, the relief was almost palpable, a fragile bloom breaking through the shadows of trauma, and she rose, stumbling slightly, then fell into his arms, wrapping her small arms around his waist with a strength born of desperation and love, and Marcus held her firmly, letting her tremble against him. Feeling the residual tension in her tiny body and absorbing it into himself, because he could endure it, he always could for her, and when she whispered, her voice shaking but clear, "I was so scared," the words were a mixture of confession and relief, a cathartic release of the terror she had carried for too long. Marcus pressed a hand to the back of her head, running his fingers gently through her hair, anchoring her in the present, in safety. In the knowledge that she was protected by a force unmatched by any criminal or threat, and he spoke softly, but with the authority and warmth that only a parent who has faced unimaginable danger can command. "You were brave," he said, his eyes locking with hers, conveying a truth that went beyond the operation, beyond the arrests and charges that had already ensnared the gang members and would keep them pondering their mistakes for years to come. Bravery doesn't mean not being afraid. It means acting even when you are. And in that moment, Jada felt a new kind of strength stir inside her, a spark that no fear could extinguish, a realization that courage was not the absence of fear but the triumph over it, and as she buried her face into his chest, the tension of the night finally began to dissolve, leaving only the warmth of connection, of love, and of safety that had been earned through strategy, skill, and unwavering devotion. And outside, the city moved on. Oblivious to the silent war that had been waged and won in the shadows, the gang arrested and charged, facing the consequences of their choices, the law enforcement officers praising the precision and restraint of the operation, noting that no innocent had been harmed, and yet the true victory was not in paperwork or commendations, but in the small apartment where a father and daughter embraced, where Jada could finally exhale. Feeling the security of knowing that the man who had returned to her life was not just a protector but a beacon of courage, and as Marcus held her, he allowed himself a rare moment of reflection, recognizing that every careful calculation, every suppressed adrenaline spike, every silent movement through the streets had led to this, that the night's work, executed flawlessly and with purpose, had restored something far more precious than safety. It had restored faith, peace, and the unspoken promise that no matter what darkness might attempt to touch them, together they would prevail. And for the first time since the attack, Jada's small hands loosened their grip, resting against him not out of fear but out of trust, her tears softening into a gentle glow of relief, while Marcus whispered again, almost to himself as much as to her, "We are safe now. And nothing will ever take that away." And in that embrace, the night's terror finally melted, leaving behind only warmth, resilience, and a bond fortified by danger, love, and the unshakable certainty that bravery once proven became a legacy passed from parent to child. A quiet triumph that needed no audience, no applause, only the simple acknowledgement of hearts beating in unison, healed by action, protected by vigilance, and strengthened by the enduring truth that even in the darkest moments, courage could shine brighter than fear. The morning sun cast a warm, golden glow over the park as Jada and Marcus walked slowly along the winding path, the air crisp and filled with the faint scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. And for the first time in days, the world felt safe, almost serene, though the memory of the chaos and fear that had threatened their lives lingered like a shadow at the edges of their thoughts, reminding them of the fragility of peace and the preciousness of what they had fought to protect. And yet as they approached a quiet corner near a large oak tree, Marcus carried a small, carefully crafted memorial in his hands, a golden plaque engraved with words that were simple yet profound. "Sonny, protector, friend, brave heart," and Jada's eyes welled up at the sight, the lump in her throat a mixture of sorrow for the companion she had lost, and gratitude for the love and loyalty that Sonny had shown. a bond so pure that even death could not diminish the memories they had shared. As Marcus knelt to gently place the plaque into the soft earth, his fingers brushing the grass and soil with reverence, and Jada knelt beside him, her small hands trembling slightly as she pressed the plaque down firmly, ensuring it would remain a permanent tribute to her beloved dog, the faithful friend who had been taken from her far too soon, yet whose courage had inspired her to find her own strength in moments when fear threatened to overwhelm. And together they arranged a few flowers around the base, bright yellow daisies and tiny white blooms, a living testament to life, love, and remembrance. And as they stood back to admire their work, Jada felt a sense of closure mingled with the warmth of hope, realizing that grief did not erase the lessons learned or the courage gained, that even in loss there could be growth, resilience, and an enduring bond with the memories of those who had shaped her heart. And Marcus placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Feeling the tension in her body ease slightly, knowing that while the scars of trauma never entirely vanish, they could be transformed into strength, and he spoke softly, his voice steady and reassuring. Sonny was brave, and so are you. Courage doesn't mean you're never afraid. It means you keep going even when the fear is there. And Jada nodded, her lips curving into a small, bittersweet smile, the tears still shimmering but now accompanied by the warmth of empowerment and self-belief. And as they walked back along the path hand in hand, the sun climbing higher, casting long shadows across the green, Jada reflected on everything that had happened, the terror of the attack, the arrival of her father, the meticulously executed justice, and the quiet moments of healing. And realized that she had changed in ways she could not have imagined, that her fear had been transformed into courage, her grief into resolve, and her loss into a deeper appreciation for the love that surrounded her, and every step she took felt lighter, imbued with the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, courage and love could conquer fear, that bravery was not the absence of danger but the triumph over it, and that she had inherited a legacy of strength from her father. A quiet power that would guide her through future challenges, shaping her into someone who could face adversity with dignity, resilience, and unwavering determination. And as they reached the park exit, the golden plaque glinting in the sunlight, Jada felt a profound sense of peace settle over her, a feeling that though life was unpredictable and loss inevitable, there was always the possibility of a new beginning, of hope reborn, of strength rediscovered. And she whispered to Marcus, "I'll never forget Sonny. Or what we've been through, but I feel stronger." And Marcus smiled, his eyes reflecting pride and relief, the bond between father and daughter fortified not just by love but by shared trials and triumphs. And he replied, "That's because you are stronger, and you always were, even when you didn't know it." And together they walked forward into the brightening day, leaving behind the shadows of fear, carrying with them memories, lessons, and the unshakable knowledge that in the face of darkness, courage, love, and determination could light the path toward a new beginning, a life where the heart remained open, the spirit unbroken, and the soul ready to embrace whatever challenges and joys lay ahead. And as the park faded behind them, the golden plaque stood as a silent testament, not only to Sonny's memory, but to the enduring power of bravery, love, and hope, a reminder etched in metal and soil that even the smallest acts of courage could ripple outward to transform lives. And Jada knew, with a quiet certainty, that she would carry this truth with her forever, that every step forward was a choice to honor the past, embrace the present, and step boldly into the future, guided by the unyielding bond of family, the lessons of survival, and the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, light could shine, hearts could heal, and courage could rise from the ashes of fear forever.